everyone, Tanya here from Creative Nest. Today's video will hopefully be a very important resource to anyone who's just purchased the Fuji X-T3. My goal in this video is to get you familiar enough with this and out the door shooting as fast as possible. If you're not already a shooter of some kind, Canon, Nikon, Sony, Panasonic, whatever, this video might trip you up a bit. It's gonna help you a lot to already have some camera knowledge. I'll stop wasting your time and just get started. Your camera is out of the box and you're ready to get going. So first thing we're gonna do is pop in your battery. Battery obviously is underneath. Your card slot's gonna be here. There's a dual card slot on the Fuji, and then all of the other things you may be looking for, like your audio jack, your microphone plug-in, your micro HDMI, and then your ability to plug into your computer are on the opposite side. First thing we're gonna do is obviously turn the camera on. I guess it already was on. We're gonna work our way from left over to right. Left is your ISO dial. If it's not turning right now, it might be because it's locked. So if you press the button, it'll unlock and lock it. Next is the dial that's underneath the ISO dial. That's controlled with a little knob over here. You have video, which is your very first one. I'm on that like 99% of the time. Second is bracketing. The CH means continuous high speed when you're burst shooting. The CL is a continuous low speed. S for just shooting like a regular person with a single shot. You also have the option for multiple exposure, advanced filters, and panoramic, but we're not gonna cover it in this video. Moving over, you have your focus dial for your viewfinder. Over here, you're gonna have your view mode. The nice thing about this is you can actually shut off your LCD screen entirely if you're worried about batteries draining, as mirrorless cameras are so well known for. If you press your view mode, you can go between just seeing everything inside. I don't think that's even really gonna work. Oh, it kind of works, okay. You can have it set to LCD only, so this is not gonna be happening for you, like you can't look through the viewfinder, or you can set it where it's sensitive. Now it's not gonna work, of course, but you can have it set up so that it only goes on when you're not pressed up against the viewfinder. So it's kind of a little smart feature for saving battery. Moving over to this dial is gonna be your metering. That can be controlled on this side with this little dial here. This one here is your shutter speed. So again, if it's not working or spinning, press the button, put it to where you want to put it, and then lock it. Obviously, you're going to be pressing your shutter button on the on and off switch. And finally, the exposure dial. I personally just leave it at 0. You might also notice that there are function dials and buttons extra, kind of like hovering around the camera. I'm not going to cover those in this video, but you can program them to do cool things. The feature that tripped me up probably the absolute most was trying to figure out where the hell the aperture setting was. I couldn't figure out how to set it to between manual or automatic. And so it's actually on the lens itself. It's not on the camera body. If you want to set a manual aperture, you have to make sure that this little dial is obviously put on the little aperture symbol. If you're looking for an automatic, well then you just put it on the A and you leave it to the camera. So if you want it as a manual, you set it to your aperture ring, and then you actually have to turn this aperture ring that's built into the lens. So if you'll notice down here that as I turn that dial, the aperture setting is changing. Then obviously the ring that follows that is your zoom, and at the very end is your focus. On the more expensive or better Fuji lenses, you actually will be able to see the aperture numbers written onto the lens itself. This is a stock lens, it's a little bit cheaper, so they haven't offered that feature, but I mean, it's pretty obvious. You can totally see it right there. Focus, this was the second thing that just destroyed me. I could not figure this out. And of course, I just refused to read the manual because I'm an idiot like that. Your focus setting is also built into your camera. So if you're looking to do manual, it's gonna be on the M, and then you can turn your focus ring to, do all that regular manual fun stuff. C is gonna be for continuous. If your subject is gonna be moving around a lot, I suggest putting it in that. And then S, I think it's for singular or stationary. I guess it doesn't really matter. Do make sure that you pick the one that's most appropriate for what you're doing between the C and the S. Because when I have a person that's just kind of sitting there not doing anything, and I have it set on C, it seems to think that the subject's gonna move, and so it picks up on things that are happening behind them. So just make sure you set it to the right one. It might save you a headache later. So let's get into some menus. I think it's really important to point out that if you're looking to shoot photo, not video, and you go into your menu, you press your menu button, obviously, that literally says menu, you might notice that a lot of this stuff isn't accessible. Like you can't get your image size, your quality, whether or not it's raw. It's like, why isn't this working? Well, the reason why it might not be working is because you have it set to video dial. So when you selected your setting, the menu is only gonna work for the things that are relevant to the setting that you've put yourself in. So if you wanna be able to access all that footage or photo related stuff, you're gonna have to go into a photo setting. So you can turn it over to the S or even the CL, CH, it really doesn't matter. Go back to your menu, and now all of a sudden you can access everything. Another cool feature on this camera that is fun to know at the beginning, the Fuji has a film simulation filter, which is called Provia Standard. That's the one it comes with originally. It looks really nice, but the Astia Soft is probably the best option for interviews. It almost acts as a filter glass, and it makes skin and complexions look a lot softer. So I pretty much leave that in permanent because I'm shooting a lot of faces on a regular basis. All right, another feature that you might want to know is how to make this thing stop beeping and making a shutter sound. The one benefit to a mirrorless camera is that it's not actually going through the whole mirror functionality. There is no shutter box. It's all digital. So there's no reason why I should have to make that really loud click sound. You can make it stop by going into your settings. So look for that little wrench. That's a wrench. Yep. Go into sound setup. And then from here, you can control any sound that might be making you want to pull your hair out. If you're trying to go back and see, of course I don't have a memory card. Anyway, point being, if you're trying to go into your playback, press your playback button. It's not obvious where the play button is. So just so you know, the down button is play. And then the sides are like to go back and forth between images on your card, but the down button is play. If you don't trust the autofocus on the camera and you want to be able to set your focal point yourself, there's this little dial here you can press, and as you're shooting you can select your focal point. If you want to set your focal area to something larger or smaller, or just change those settings in general, you can go to your menu and then select the AF/MF, and you can select your focus area, your autofocus mode. Again, if you know how to use a camera, this is going to be really straightforward for you. The biggest learning curve on this camera is the physical functionality. Also, just briefly going to go over selecting full auto versus full manual. That's going to come down to how you set your dials up. So if you want to shoot in full auto, you're just going to want to make sure that everything is set to the A, right? So come on. You're going to make sure everything's set to the A. If you want to shoot in full manual, obviously, you're going to set that to manual, your aperture, and then select whatever the hell you want on your dial rings. This also means you're gonna have to set your priority settings or priority shooting options yourself. So unlike being able to select a mode on a Canon or a Nikon that's like shutter priority or aperture priority, you have to set it yourself, but it's really not that difficult. So in the event that you want aperture priority, you go, okay, I'm gonna set my aperture to manual because I've prioritized that setting. I wanna make sure it stays at 2.8, and then you put everything else on auto, because you're gonna let the camera decide those other things, but you wanna make sure you've prioritized your aperture setting. It's the same thing for shutter. If you decide, okay, it has to stay at 250, so set it to 250, and then put your ISO on auto and your aperture on auto. You've made the decision that you want that to take priority at 250, and then the camera will decide what it wants to do with your aperture and your ISO. Finally, if you want ISO priority, which is, I guess that can happen too, set the ISO that you want manually, and then make sure everything else, your shutter and your aperture, are in automatic. All right, so that wraps this tutorial video. Hopefully I didn't fly through it too quickly and you got something out of it. If you did get something out of it, please like at the very least, maybe comment, subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Now go out and make something awesome. Bye.